Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind everybody to go and support our partners in safety. They help make this podcast possible. Of course, I'm talking about Mighty Line Floor Tape. If you have issues in your facilities with layout, organization, maybe it's causing safety concerns, Mighty Line has you covered. You can 5S your entire facility without having to paint any of your floors. They have floor marking tape, they have logos. You can make custom signs with your logos. You've got all kinds of floor marking, directional arrows, signs. You want the little footprints on your floor to show people where to walk. They've got that stuff too. They've got grip tape. They've got line tape that is built to withstand forklift traffic. Look, don't take my word for it. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Get a free sample of their floor tape today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Next up, we have Aero Safety. Aero Safety has been a supporter of the podcast for a long time. I've gotten to know Drew Hinton over there at Aero Safety. We've had Drew on several times on the podcast, and hope to have him back soon as well. We talk about a lot of safety management stuff, and we talk about all kinds of topics that are important to safety managers. One thing that you want to concern yourself with is if you have a need for any kind of support, whether it's written program development, audits, inspections, training for your workers, Aero Safety is going to be the one you want to call. They're going to customize an approach that fits your business needs, not some canned generic training or three-ring binder off the shelf and hand it off to you like it's your own safety program. It's going to be something that is designed specifically based on your needs. Aero has you covered with all of that stuff. Go to aerosafetyus.com and get a custom quote today. Again, go to aerosafetyus.com.
All right, welcome back to the Safety Pro podcast. We're laughing because I was just telling Drew of the various times that I have screwed up on the podcast. Most recently, when a pop-up came up on this program we're using and it stopped the recording, and I didn't realize it, and talked with my guest for an hour and was not recording. Drew Hinton from Aero Safety, also a partner in safety on the podcast. Thanks for continued support on the podcast, man. You help make this happen, so it's always a pleasure to get to talk to you on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so man, we're going to talk. You're based in Kentucky,
right?
How long have you lived and worked in Kentucky?
I've grew up here, lived my whole life, other than I guess a year and a half in Diesel College in Nashville. I lived down there, and then I worked in Indiana. Like I was based out of Indiana, but I've still lived in Kentucky on the other side of the river for about 2 years at a chemical manufacturer. But other than that, been here pretty much my whole life. So
all right,
30 so plus years.
You're dialed in then to Kentucky. Kentucky, as far as workplace safety goes, Kentucky is a state-run plan.
Right.
Hasn't approved. So Kentucky OSHA, kosher? Is it kosher? It's like I'm saying kosher, but with a Boston accent.
It's a kosher OSHA.
It's kosher. So Kentucky, what is it? What are the compliance officers? They're not compliance. What are they called? Kentucky Labor Cabinet. Is it the Labor Cabinet?
Yes. Yeah, it's in the Division of Education and Labor. There's a couple different divisions, and it's similar stuff to federal as far as like there's the enforcement side and consultation side of things. But yeah, they're under a little bit different label than the typical OSHA per se.
Right. And so for years there have been some differences between state Kentucky requirements in some areas of the standards, whether it's construction or general industry or both, and federal OSHA. Kind of pick out like probably the most common difference that Kentucky has in one of those standards that you've dealt with?
So, in my opinion, I guess we've got dozens of state-specific OSHA standards that are, we'll either reinvent the wheel completely or we'll just change a paragraph. But the ones that I see most commonly that apply to everybody, and also that ends up being one of the misunderstood or they just aren't aware of it, are all dealing with the medical side of things. So anything from like incident reporting. So the Kentucky statute, for as long as I can remember, it would say for the inpatient hospitalizations, amputations, loss of an eye, we've got 72 hours to report it versus 24. So we got 3 days versus 1. There's a little bit different definition of amputation. They say that it has to include bone loss, whereas federal says it can be with or without bone loss or bone tissue loss. I think is the way it's worded. But there's another one that I was a huge fan of. It's dealing with it's the equivalent of the medical and first aid services or medical services first aid standard 1910-151. So Kentucky said that any employer with 8 or more employees had to train somebody in first aid, at least one person or persons.
On site. They have to be on site.
Yeah. You train one of your employees. Whereas like federal just says if you're not in near proximity, then you train somebody. So basically Kentucky was saying we don't care if you got 8 or more employees, we don't care if the hospital's right across the street, you got to train somebody.
Yeah.
Which I was a big proponent of. You know just as well as I do. Sometimes fire EMS can show up when you expect it, and sometimes they can't. And sometimes there's a lot of issues can go on that can play into severity of medical incidents. So that's one I was a big fan of. And they got rid of one last a similar one. I guess it was last year, maybe year before. I think it was last year. We were one of 15 or 16 states that if you had an AED in the workplace, you were required to have a licensed physician oversee that AED program. Somebody licensed in your state oversee that. We were one of 15 or 16 states that had that program, and they got rid of it. I think it was last year, pretty much a year ago now. A lot of employers, which is valid defense, a lot of employers said, "Look, this is we don't want to pay $3,000 a year for this." Physician oversight program that we're probably never going to use. So they saw it as a deterrent to getting AEDs. So they said, look, let's just take that off and not have to deal with that, which we still teach it and still say, hey, look, we still recommend that, if feasible, go ahead and do that. That way you at least got somebody on, to consult with or, review the AED data with if you ever have to, hopefully you never have to, but if you ever have to actually use it in the workplace, you can review that data with the physicians, look at improvements, all things like that.
Yeah. So some key differences. You pointed out some things. One, 72 hours to report hospitalization versus 24. The other one was amputation. I remember a compliance officer was doing some training once, and he's like, look, this is pretty simple. If you cut it off and it doesn't grow back, pretty good bet that was an amputation. Even if it was the tip of the finger, like you said, there's no bone loss, but part of your nail or your tip of your finger has to be removed, and you've got now a little flat spot. It's good for scrolling. But yeah, that was it. And so with Kentucky, it has to include bone loss. The myth is, and we've all known this in safety, you've probably either said a version of it, I know I have, or heard a version of this, is that states are allowed to run their own safety and health program as long as at a minimum it meets the federal standard or is more stringent. That's actually not true.
Right.
It has to be approved by federal OSHA. If the Department of Labor, OSHA in this case, approves the state plan, it's good. That's the standard. Not that, oh, wait a minute, you can't make it 72 hours. That's less stringent than federal OSHA, so you can't do that. And it's like, well, they can because federal OSHA approved it. So. Right. So you were bringing up some interesting points. So there's a little a little occupational safety and health law lesson for our friends out there. Why we're talking about Kentucky OSHA today is that at the time of our having this discussion a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little more than a week ago.
Yeah, 27th. So I guess.
What did Kentucky decide to do?
So House Bill 398 for Kentucky, it got passed months ago, but it went into effect on June 27th. So a couple weeks ago, roughly, went into effect on June 27th. Which what that did was said that for private employers, because public employers is a little bit different story here. We'll get into that. But for private employers, it said that the Kentucky OSHA cannot adopt, promulgate, whatever, any standards that are either not mentioned by federal OSHA or that are more stringent than OSHA. So essentially, for private employers, we're going back to the federal OSHA standards. But it did, like I said, it doesn't cover public. This change doesn't cover public employers. So that stuff they can still make their state specific regulations for public employers. But for all private, we're essentially going back to the federal OSHA side of things.
Now, it's another important distinction worth noting here. The state plan can cover just private employers if the state so chooses, and or can cover private employers and public employers and those workers. So your municipalities, police, fire. I'll throw another wrinkle in there after this, but teachers are a good example, right? In Ohio, they fall under the state, for years they fell under the Public Employee Risk Reduction Program. Oddly enough, the acronym is PERP. So, gives a whole new meaning to the term perp walk. If you, but, so yeah, the Public Employee Risk Reduction Program, the state monitored themselves, like the workers, my wife was a teacher, so I was very familiar with that set of standards.
Yeah.
So Kentucky has opted to only cover public employers. Private employers, private industry, not public employees. Is that correct?
The public employees, fire, EMS, teachers, whatever, we can still create state specific plans. So that's really what Kentucky's covering, and we're essentially just saying all private employers are essentially
we're letting them go back to federal OSHA.
We're letting them go. They've still got the Kentucky Administrative Regulations, KAR statutes, but it just now basically they're going through. I'll get email updates. This has blown me up the last week or so from where they're going in making these emergency updates, and they'll send you an email saying, we're now marking out the shows where they strike through the entire document, and it says we're just going to follow federal OSHA now.
Redacted. Yeah.
The entire document's redacted.
So they're not saying federal OSHA come into our state, set up offices.
Correct.
That's not what they're saying. They're saying we're going to follow that standard, but we're still going to manage the safety program for the state. The state of Kentucky is still going to manage it.
The OSHA will be showing up. Not okay. Something happens.
So you mentioned the first aid. People have often joked about this. I was on a job site just over the river, across the Ohio River, and it was in northern Kentucky. And they joked they could see, it was a parking garage project. They could see the hospital. They're like, the hospital's right there. And I said, dude, you don't call the hospital to come get you.
Right.
You call EMS, an ambulance, and you're in construction. If something happens, if it's minor, you drive to the first aid, you go to urgent care, or you can go to that hospital, but you got this initial need for first aid, that you have to do. But if it's bad enough, who knows how long? Yes, you can see the hospital, but you don't know how long. Right. It's going to take for a crew to show up and get to this place. So I always kind of laughed when somebody was like, but the hospital's right there. You don't call the hospital. You call 911. Right. I don't know where they are. And they could be at lunch. So
don't have break.
they're across town at the sushi place, and they have to leave. How many lunches have you left on the table, by the way? I can't even tell you.
Oh yeah,
How many,
countless.
yeah, how many times we had to leave Skyline because a call came in. All right, so that's one example you kind of alluded to that you were a big fan of, and I like that one as well. That seems reasonable. That somebody at the site is trained in basic first aid CPR. I mean, it's not like we're asking them to be, paramedic, get their,
Right.
Paramedic certification. Where else do you see regulations? And you said they were mostly with the medical record keeping type of thing. Do you know the history behind that? Like why that was the area of focus for Kentucky?
No, not honestly. But I do know that Kentucky OSHA has had some cases that have kind of, I guess, paved the way for some interpretations for even federal. So
To set those to where they sort of landed on, okay, we need to adjust in these areas.
So, for example, there was a court case. I want to say it was back in 2017. It was Kentucky OSHA, and I want to say it was a Louisville Water Commission. I don't know what they were. I can forget what they were specifically discussing in the legal matter. But what came of that was a clarification, which I kind of interpreted that way, anyways. But it wasn't in writing. Was a clarification that if you have first responders at your site, like designated first responders that we're training and expecting to respond, that it automatically triggers the bloodborne pathogens exposure control plan. Wasn't in writing with federal OSHA. As far as I know, there wasn't any interpretations, but I know that was a big, written documented outcome of that case. Was that as soon as you got first responders, because there's, we do all of our guys, myself, EMTs, paramedics, we do a ton of CPR training. There's a lot of people that bring us in to do CPR training, but don't have an exposure control plan or have anything to do with bloodborne pathogens. You're like, oh, I thought that was nurses or whatever. I'm like, nope, you're designating them to respond. That triggers all that stuff for you, which we can cover that easily. But I don't know where the origin of that stuff is, honestly. But I always thought it was interesting. Like I said, for the 8 or more employees, they say at least one person be trained. If you're under that, so if you're 1 to 7 employees, then you just follow federal OSHA. They say the near proximity, clause there, train somebody, which, still doable. I mean, it's like I said, even if you got 7 people, still recommend you have at least somebody trained in first aid, at least knows what to do, in that capacity. But yeah.
Yeah. So I always thought it was interesting. The bloodborne pathogen one, the interpretation is what you alluded to, that if it's my full-time job, that's my job. That's my purpose for being at this place of employment, is to be exposed to that stuff. Reasonably, I can be exposed to those. If somebody who's just got layperson community first aid CPR, I think I remember, and this is in some of the letters of interpretation, is there's no expectation to provide. Like they just say somebody has to be trained in certain cases. If the need should arise, that isn't their job title. That's not right. So
it's a collateral duty.
Right. And I always thought that was weird because you cover bodily fluids, OPIM, and all that good stuff. You should in the training.
Right.
But because there's a whole separate standard that has refresher training and some material stuff you have to have on hand and all that, that's where I think people get confused. It's like, oh no, I had first aid training. They talked about, universal precautions and bloodborne pathogens. And I'm like, yeah, but that isn't, there's a whole separate standard.
Right.
So people get confused. So because Kentucky decided to say, no, you must designate somebody, we're going to interpret, which is an example of going stricter, right? Of saying, no, we are going to drag this other part of the standard along with that. So now you have to have an exposure control plan. You have to have the kits, the cleanup kits, and all that good stuff.
Right.
The AEDs is interesting with the states that do require that, and I ran into this in California many years ago. Yeah, the medical review officer or whatever, but it's like, wait a minute, these things are in shopping malls where the general public can grab it.
Yep.
And it just and it says press here, put these here. They say, I know everybody should get trained in this. I'm a firm believer in that, and refresher training. But they say that they're so easy that, like, that's the whole point of the design, is to increase the likelihood that they get used. It's funny that that device you have to have, and I'm not saying I'm pro or against, I'm just saying the logic doesn't track across these programs.
Right.
That requires a medical review officer, a doctor, a physician to oversee that if you're going to have those in the workplace. But I can train Jethro to immobilize and splint, or I don't know, like, right? And I'm good. I don't need any physician or doctor to oversee that training program, or that, like, maybe Jethro isn't the one you want to train. You know what I mean? I always thought that was weird. That's just sort of a little side note. I don't lose any sleep over, like, Kentucky taking that one away from that logic standpoint. But I do feel like some of these like that device, for example, like, I'm going to kind of negate my own argument here. We're training people in first aid CPR, and we just have the local Red Cross person come in or something, like and we're talking about treating people who are bleeding, who have been in maybe a horrific accident, maybe trying to do what they can until help arrives. That's the whole first aid motto, until help arrives. And this little box that will run itself, that we just stick on and watch, right, needs a medical review. I would think it's the opposite. I would encourage people to, if you really want to increase or give a shot in the arm, no pun intended, to your first aid program, maybe step it up with, like, what AEDs are required to do in some of these states. Maybe get a professional to oversee or look at your first aid program and make sure that it's really dialed in. You're going to use that hell of a lot more than you will an AED, statistically speaking.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, I want to say, you're talking about California, I want to say there was a startup there 5 years ago or so. They reached out to us and wanted us to give them some feedback. It was a really neat concept. I don't know the feasibility side of it, but you're talking about, like, workplace versus just, average person
out at the shopping mall.
Yeah.
Or the airport. Airports are a good example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So they had created this, I guess, model that was designed to be placed in your house. So they were designing it for homes versus workplace. Really, what I remember is really small, like, probably half the size of an actual AED. But I guess the benefit or the selling point of that one, or whatever you want to call it, was that if a 911 call came out in your neighborhood, your AED would alert whatever, in hopes that you would grab it and run to your neighbor's house and try to use that before fire EMS gets there. I don't know if it took off, but I was like, it's kind of neat concept.
Wait. So it's like a connected device where
Wi-Fi connected, I guess, or something.
If you were in the vicinity, like within 3 houses or I don't know, something, and a tone drops for that address, it could also ping your device so that you could, maybe for a cardiac event, cardiac event, you could go and help.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, like I said, great concept. Like I said, I don't know feasibility. I can't remember the cost of it. If the average person can, much money that stuff.
Better be nice to your neighbors, bro. I'm just saying. You better hope your neighbor likes you.
I'm not getting invited to cookouts anymore.
You're like, he never mows his lawn. I'm not going over there. Yeah. Wow, interesting. Yeah, that's a sign of I think the times of like, and that's why I said it sounds like it's sort of like a connected device where they could do that. I wonder if it works the other way, if their device would notify 911 if you pulled it and used it and got it out, turned it on.
Possibly. My kid's probably pulling off the wall and like 911 showing up at our front door all the time. We're like,
Oh my God. Well, that's why a lot of cities, like in my city, if I got a monitored alarm system, like that notifies them,
mm-hmm.
that I have to submit a permit and pay a permit. I have to pay the city to read this piece of paper that says I have a monitoring system, monitored alarm system that will notify them. It's because of all the false. It's like all the false alarms.
To that point too. Maybe think of it. As far as I understand, I think most states have something similar. Maybe not all. But on the AED topic, most states are required. If you get an AED in the workplace, you're still supposed to contact EMS and tell them, "Hey, I have an AED here," but nobody ever does that.
Yeah. What do you know the logic behind that as well? Like why is it important that I notify EM? I think I know, but I'm speculating because I don't know the source for this. But do you know the background on that, or do you just have an opinion or thought?
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. My opinion, I mean, you can understand this as well, right? We're rolling fire EMS and we hear CPR is already in progress. I mean, that's kind of music to our ears. What I like to say is, that person has a standing chance. But on the opposite side of things, at least what we did in fire EMS in Louisville was all the fire departments, say most at least, we would always we would get Life Pack, the Physio Control brand AEDs, because we knew that EMS had the same model of cardiac monitor. So what that meant for us is, we didn't, at the time we were just BLS, we didn't have paramedics, but what that meant was if EMS showed up, they knew that they can unplug the pads from our AED and plug straight to their cardiac monitor.
You can use their leads. You don't have to put new pads on and take that time. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a planning thing. Hey, we want you, if people realize the law and they call ahead of time and say, hey, we're looking at doing this. What do y'all need to know? Oh, just by the way, here's the brand AED. If you want to do that, I don't know. But
people don't realize this as well. In a lot of municipalities, mine was a good example. It was actually a stranger than most. I worked for the township fire department. They had a separate EMS, but we were all under the fire, like our structure, right? We were all, it wasn't like a private EMS company. It was the township fire and EMS. So the paramedics would roll if they got a medic call, fire engine crew would roll. We would often go and support, but we would roll if there was a vehicle accident or a fire or something like that. We would have to go to take care of that portion of it, extrication or stuff like that, for example. Mm-hmm. It was separate. They were separate. I call it divisions of the company, if you want to think of it in terms of that way. Police, we know, are different. They're different. Same city, same stuff. So, to your point, police who are trained because they'll probably get there first, right? Mm-hmm. We call them the Blue Canaries. I won't tell you why. I'll let you figure that one out.
I know. They don't like the powdered donut roll either. So
no. So they would get there, and to your point, they would have compatible equipment. AEDs being the example. Mm-hmm. Man, what was strange is I worked for the township fire, so we covered the city and the township was our jurisdiction. But the city had its own police department, and then the township used the sheriff's department, sheriff's officers. And so we had two law enforcement agencies we had to work with and coordinate with. So we covered the city didn't have a police and didn't have a fire EMS. It was the township fire and EMS covered the whole geographic area. The township and the city that was in that township. Very strange. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But it's funny, when I went down to Texas for a conference, and it said TWP on it, TWP Fire.
Yeah.
And I won't name the township. It had the name of the township, then TWP and a fire, and they were like, "What's a TWIP?" They didn't know. So somebody from another
Hard to get
state,
to work at the port.
yeah, they were like, "What? It's a township? I have no idea. What's that?" And I'm like, you know what? I'm not entirely sure. And I work there.
Just go with it.
Yeah, it's a way to incorporate without becoming a city. But and then there's some tax issues too. But yeah, like New York cities, there's boroughs, they have aldermen, and I'm like, what country am I in right now? I have no idea about any of that stuff. So I can imagine across the country, like a federal OSHA, it's all one size fits all type of approach. And so that's where I've been a fan of, like, when a state can say this, yeah, in general, this makes sense. However, like, we've got a lot of this stuff going on, for example, and you can name sort of all these different agencies that respond. We have a large rural community, for example, so we have private ambulances, and your response time is going to be insane. Mm-hmm. Yeah, OSHA says in that case you have to, but we're going to add a couple of other things to that or whatever. I've always been a big supporter of sort of like states' rights, I guess you could call that, to kind of do something along those lines. Do you see this move in Kentucky, just your opinion, for private employers anyway, as sort of going backwards, or what was, in your reading between the lines, what kind of pushed this thing through, or what brought this thing up?
So, at least from what I've read, the big, I guess, selling point per se of the people that are proponents of doing this, of moving it back to the federal for the private industry, was that it's going to make compliance easier for businesses. But my stance is easier doesn't always equate to safe, right? So
how would it make it easier, do you think? Or what are they saying anyway? Or do you know?
They're saying we're not going to make anything more stringent or, state specific. So, for example, anybody that's been in safety knows that's, number one most cited hazard for like 15 years running is fall protection and construction. So we've got some specifics on residential construction in addition to the federal, about all the way down to like floors and just joists and trusses, all kinds of stuff on there, give you some other options. So like I said, they're big.
You mean for like anchor points and things like that?
Well, so for example, if you look at whether it's 1926 Subpart M, the construction industry fall protection standard is similarly worded over in general industry.
Yep.
They're going to tell you to, really use the term conventional fall protection a lot. They'll say guardrail systems, safety nets, or personal fall protection systems, personal fall rest system. Whereas Kentucky has all that, and they'll say, or other measures specified throughout the KER, the Kentucky state law on there. So they'll talk about if you're working on floor systems, you can also do this. If you're working on roofs, it's specifically, you can also do X, Y, Z. So now it's taking back a couple options on that. They did, I don't know if anybody actually used it per se, but I know that we, as Kentucky, they allowed the fall protection plan to be used in other situations other than what federal OSHA says, because they're only going to allow you to, if you're in construction, usually like precast concrete, leading edge, stuff like that. We had a couple other options on there, but there was one thing out there, because I was looking over these fall protection standards the other day as well, kind of trying to pick apart what's going to change and what's the issues on there, is we had a different definition of steep versus low slope roof, whereas federal is 412 pitch or less. Yep. Ours separates at 312 pitch. So that means, a 412 pitch for Kentucky is considered steep, whereas federal is considered still low slope roof. So
that's why I never like those vague or ambiguous terms. Don't tell me steep.
Yeah.
Tell me the pitch.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to that, so now, because you've got other options on low slope roofs as far as like, warning line systems, safety monitoring systems, all that stuff. So now previously they would say, we would take the more restrictive side and say, look, we're going to call 4 to 12 steep. That means you can't do this stuff here. We're going to be more protective on here. Now we're going back to the stuff. I think 4 to 12 is still a decent little slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I've read multiple articles, and I think this bill was initially pushed. I think it was 4 or 5 Republican, make it political, just 4 or 5 Republicans, because if you know safety, you know that different parties always have different views, and they kind of stay with that. They pushed it, but like I said, the big selling point I've seen from every article I've read was that it's going to make businesses easier to comply with. So, I mean, aside from the now 24-hour, call to OSHA for inpatient hospitalizations, amputations, loss of an eye, that's more stringent. And then definitions a little bit different on there. But other than that, from what I understand, I'd say 90% of these standards are going to be now going less restrictive. So now companies can get by with less, essentially. But I mean, there's 2 sides to it, right? So if I'm a business, if I'm just striving just to meet OSHA, and I can't meet that, which, I mean, we could also make the argument, look, there's no workplace that's 100% compliant 100% of the time. Yeah. There's always some kind of non-compliance issue going on at, any given time. But if we set the bar, right, I think one of the, forget which one of those safety lawyers out there that's, the firms out there was like, OSHA's the floor, right? It's not the ceiling.
It's the bottom rung. Yeah.
Right. So now, essentially for Kentucky, now we're making a basement. Essentially, we're making a lower floor than what we had.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I get that argument. When you have a standard and you roll it backwards.
Yeah.
You're rolling it backwards.
Yeah.
I get it. And I think, but if you look at another argument to this, because I'm kind of like torn. I'm kind of in the middle. In that I can see both sides. I don't know that I 100% agree with one or the other, or parts of one and parts of the other. But like Ohio, for example, we're a federal state. And we had crews that went down to Kentucky to work. We had projects in Indiana. Indiana's a state plan. Ohio is surrounded by state plans. People don't realize that. Pennsylvania, right? We got Michigan. We've got Indiana, Kentucky. Those are the big 3 I would call out. So we would have crews that would have projects in northern Kentucky, Indiana. And we just had this diagram of this chart for construction, mostly for fall protection. Like you said, we're like, okay, well, if you're down there, you have to do this. If you go over this bridge,
right,
and work on this project, you don't have to do that. You could do this. Yeah. And it's like, I get that in those cases, it could make it easier to comply. If you only have a company in Kentucky and you only operate in Kentucky,
sure,
this is all you know anyway.
Yep.
I don't know what it's making it easier to comply with. You don't have anything to compare it with. But if you are a multi-state company, I have an office or a manufacturing site in Ohio, and then I have one in Kentucky, and I have one in Indiana. It's like, okay, I can see how you could claim that it's going to make it easier to comply, because all we're doing is going to the federal standard, which is widely accepted, safety standard. I guess I get that logic, but if, like I said, if you've never left the state, if you just operate in the state of Kentucky, I don't know how it's making it. It's making it easier in now I'm going back to your argument. I agree with you. It's making it easier because you don't have to do as much in some of these areas, like the pitch, right, or the fall protection, man, this is interesting. It's an interesting time to see how. Are you hearing from employers that are confused? They're happy? They're not happy? A mix of all of it? What?
I haven't heard back yet. We've got several customers that we kind of do, have our own retainer. We do X amount of hours of work for them a month. And so when that happened, we all, me and my guys, we sent crews out or sent emails out to their management and said, look, this just went into effect. We're going to work on revising your all's policies, and we'll discuss which ones we want to keep. And like, do we want to stay with what Kentucky has previously enforced, even though it's not enforceable anymore or not required per se? Do we want to stay at that more stringent level, or do we want to go back to federal? So we sent out emails that following Monday after that, so I guess the 30th, and said, look, this is what happened. So haven't heard back yet. We're going to meet with some of them this week, so we probably should be hearing back from them on that to see what they want to do. Honestly, I think a lot of them probably don't know about it, to be honest with you. So we put out a social media post about it, but there was a lot of laws that went into effect that day, non-safety related.
Kind of buried the lead.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. You were talking about like going across state lines. I'm not a proponent of the NOSHA Act that they've been trying to pass out. Was it?
Yeah. It's
one
guy. It was one guy.
He's been trying for like 3 or 4 years, but that was his. Or that was the issue I saw. I was like, well, now there's no consistency across the board. So now every state I go to is going to have their own.
I blame the media for that garbage. That was a convenient story, if you ask me, that they picked up and ran with it and tried to apply it to a large group of our lawmakers. It was one individual, never had a co-sponsor. Nobody signed on to that thing. It was a publicity stunt, really, is what it was.
Yep.
So, throwing that out, like, it's interesting because, like you said, especially the clients, Kentucky clients you're working with, you're helping them navigate this. There's a lot of companies, I'll say, in Kentucky that don't have that help, and they could be unaware.
Right.
And figuring out, do you want to stick with what you already have, that it's familiar, it's working, you're obviously making money, you're successful, you're able to do this, or do you want to change? There's some risk, the optics with your workers. You're still meeting a standard. The law changed, so we're meeting this law, and they're going, yeah, but you got us on a steeper roof with
right.
There's that risk of with your workplace culture, damaging sort of this perception, right? But then you have those instances where if you stick with what you had before, you could be in violation of the new state standard, which is based on federal OSHA. Like, no, we're going to do the 72 hours. Well, you can't. You actually have to go. You don't have a choice.
Contradict,
So really, it's a matter of creating this chart of, yes, you can stay. No, you have to change.
Right.
The type of yes, no kind of thing. This is interesting. This is strange. I'm wondering if other states that have state-run plans are going to do something similar. Like I said, the states, there's two types of states, right? We always joke. There's states that want to run their own just because they don't want federal OSHA in their state. They'll follow the same stuff, but they just want state. The state wants to oversee it. And then there are states that are like, well, we have, and for good reason, we have some specialized industries, like we're listening to them. They subscribe to these international standards, or the standards that are way more stringent than OSHA or whatever. So we're going to kind of do something, or we're going to address a special need that we have in our community in some way. And then I guess if you had to force me to pick a third category, I would say you've got states that I would say California. Everyone likes to crack on California. My poor California folks out there. I love them. I love the safety professionals that we all know in California. But man, there's a reason why it's a joke, or it's a, I don't say California's not a joke. I mean, it's a joke that we all use to say, oh, well, it's a California.
Yeah.
We all know.
I'm actually going back out there Friday to do flying out Friday, teaching the classes on
Yep.
Saturday for electrical NFPA 7E class. And I've had to, brush up on my Cal OSHA standards. And we did the same thing a couple months ago. We did a fall rescue from heights class out in outside Sacramento area. And so they got some fall protection specific requirements on there. So I had to brush up on that. I was like, oh, these are outside the norm, but that's what you got to do here. So we got to follow that.
I think that would be a great panel interview. We can get some of our other colleagues on and we each take a state and we just pick like one of the craziest differences or standards that they have that other states probably would have never thought of.
Yeah.
And then just talk about it. That would be fun.
Yeah. You talked about, states that do they have, special hazards, special industries.
Yep.
One that I've always liked is Michigan OSHA. We did some audits up there years ago at a couple of Lexus dealerships outside of Detroit, and they've got their own automotive service station standard specifically. It gets in everything from I come probably nerd out on this because I came from being an auto diesel mechanic for years. But they got requirements on annual inspections on your automotive lifts and everything you can think of. So I mean, for us, Kentucky here has it's not an automotive service station standard, but it's just like federal has the 1910-106 got the flammable liquids. They've got a definition of automotive service station in there. Federal talks about dispensing of flammable liquids, uses motor fuels throughout, whereas Kentucky says we're going to cover flammable and combustible. So that might not cover, for us, federal wouldn't necessarily cover, diesel fuel in certain situations. So now Kentucky's, like I said, we're a little more stringent than that. But I always thought Michigan OSHA was interesting for that aspect and of having all those automotive standards because I'll be the first one to tell you, working at several dealerships as a mechanic, safety was never mentioned. It might be like you get hired, hey, here's the STSs or back at the MSTSs, and that's about the extent of it. Like there's no PPE talks, there's no training whatsoever, nothing. And these were major dealerships in Louisville, Kentucky. So I always thought that was interesting that they had that, and I think it's a good one out there to have. And I've kind of recommended to any dealerships we go to, say, hey, we like to see people follow these specific standards from Michigan. They're good practices.
Yeah, I mean it's a big automotive state.
Yeah.
Right, especially in the Detroit area in its heyday, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I worked in a shop that when I first got there, they had a lift and that nobody liked to work on because it would bleed pressure periodically. And I'm like, fix it. What?
Right.
Why? Like, I don't, if you're that or just tag it out, lock it out.
Right.
And until you can get it repaired. And there were issues with it. So in Ohio, under the workers' comp program, it's a state-managed workers' compensation plan, not one of the few that have it that way. But I really like it. Maybe it's because it's all I know. So I've got like
Stockholm syndrome. Here, so.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome. I'm a kept guy. So it's all I know, but I really I got to know it. And so I loved the way like all the employers kick into it. And it's reasonable. All the rates are set by national standards, the MIRA system, but or whatever they got to now, the newer system. But anyway, they had a grant program that you could apply for. And the grant would pay for certain equipment based on what you're writing the grant for. So I wrote a grant. I should put that on my resume. Grant writer. I wrote one grant many, many years ago. And I used it as an MSD reduction because the work that they were doing, they had 3 lifts. The work that they were doing with overhead work, they weren't able to adjust the lifts, and they had to use, they didn't have the locks. These were old lifts.
Mm-hmm.
So it forced them to just get every vehicle all the way up so that they could use these stands underneath them. And I don't want to say we could have gone with adjustable stands and everything, but that introduced some risk as well. Always having to screw
Sure.
the stand to adjust it and everything. Basically got new lifts, and that's how I was able to fund the replacement of that lift.
Nice.
Was I saw a grant opportunity, but there you go, safety nerds. Go see if you've got any grants in your state or whatever to get some stuff done. All right, so Myosh has that one. What do the Hoosiers have? Do you know? They got anything really like around corn? Maybe I don't know. I'm just,
No, actually,
that should be
they
Ohio, by the way. We grow so much corn in Ohio.
no, so they're kind of the one category you mentioned. Like they kind of just want to do their own thing. So
Yeah.
I lived in Kentucky, a little bit Louisville, but I worked at a chemical plant that was based out of Jeffersonville, Indiana,
Yeah.
across the river. And Indiana OSHA, IOSHA, they had at the time only one state-specific regulation, which was excavations. But they've since repealed that, so there's really no state-specific regs anymore, even though there's still state rents. They kind of just want to run their own thing basically now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those states that I don't mind the federal regs, but we're going to oversee it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. All right. The fact that federal, the administration funds up to 50% of a state-run plan.
So around there, yeah.
That might be an incentive enough for some of these states to go, nah, we've got people. We're just going to get some federal funding now. So,
Yeah.
I don't hate it. All right.
There we go.
Cool. All right. What do you got going on? Anything coming up exciting for you? I know you do webinars every once in a while, and I try to share those as well because I know they're pretty interesting. You got any cool stuff coming up?
Yeah, I'm gonna try actually this week. I'm back in the office until Thursday, and then I'm trying to get some more webinars for us lined up, and we'll probably be announcing those this week what those topics are. So be on the lookout for those. And then I actually got an email. Speaking of Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp, I got an email the other day. I'm gonna probably submit a proposal for them. Got to figure out what topic I want to present at their conference next year.
Oh, the Ohio Safety Congress and Expo.
Yeah.
BWC. Yeah.
Yep. But so we got a lot of traveling coming up. Like I said, July's always busy for us. I got a Friday leave out for California and teach Saturday, and then go from there to Texas and teach Monday through Wednesday. Come back and go to Virginia, and then we got a new it's a 40-hour fall protection program administrator course that's taken off, and we created. We're starting to get a lot of traction on that, so we got to teach that in Tennessee to a customer down there. But yeah, we got looking to go into India in September, possibly.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah. So we've been talking about that on and off for about 2 or 3 years, and they finally pulled the plug and said, "Okay, we got the money approved for you to come over." So I guess we have my understanding. It's like they're the guy, my contacts. He works for the state in India. And I guess it's like kind of like a Kentucky OSHA equivalent. Like he works for them, the state. Labor Department, forgets what it's called. We're going to go over there probably September, I guess, when all the typhoons and all that stuff's calmed down. And
Oh, it's seasonal. They have a season for that. Yeah.
yeah. It wants to do some training. And I guess one thing still blows my mind about over there is, so over here, like OSHA can't just show up at your front door unless they got a reason, right? So he's like, well, we could just go out to these facilities and we want you to look and see what they got wrong and tell us what they need. It's like, just go in. We can go into any facility you want to. I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of weird.
Wait a minute. Isn't that what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, and they're asking me to do it for them.
Hey, look, it's good. It's a paying gig. It's good work.
That's right.
You're able to help some people. But so are you like helping to coach them and train them? If so, that sounds cool as well.
Yeah, so it's gonna be like half training them and then half kind of going out with them. Like said,
learn by doing, right?
He's like, we can just show up at any facility we want to, anytime. I was like,
yeah, a lot of countries are like that.
Yeah.
Yep. Interesting. All right, we got some exciting stuff coming up. Anybody that wants to check out what Aero Safety can do for your company, go to aerosafetyus.com. Make sure you tell Drew that you heard about it here on the podcast. Let him know that, you're listening. That helps me too.
Yeah,
That lets me know you're listening.
On our end too. So
there you go. Drew, thanks so much for taking time out of your crazy schedule and talking about this very specific case in Kentucky where they're going back to following the federal standard. I don't know that I've heard that in my career. Maybe it's happened. I just nobody talked about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody talked about it. All right, and I'll have a link to your website in the show notes for this episode as well.
Perfect.
And we'll get together soon.
Sounds good, sir.
All right, we'll see you.
All right, take care.